My name is John Wolfe, and I grew up right here in Indianapolis, and I have known Brian for almost 40 years. Mike Seyer asked me if I would like to speak today, and I am honored to do so. I welcome all of you, and I am grateful to be a part of the Seyer family and of this great group assembled here today. The thoughts I want to share with you mean so much to me, and I hope that they seem relevant to you. I don't want to bore anyone. It's a little bit of a long address here, but I am compelled to take my best shot at this for Brian. I love him, and he will always be with me. So I was born January 2nd, 1968, and Brian was born May 8th the same year. So Brian was born approximately 4 months after me, which meant while we were growing up that I was a lot older than Brian. I guess we met each other when we were 5 years old, and around the same time we met Mark Nisenbaum. So it's important to note that there were 3 of us, and at least 2 of us were together at all times from age 5 up into high school. I loved growing up with the Seyers, my second family, and spending time at their sprawling, storybook-like farmhouse. My dad first rode me on the back of his motorcycle over to Brian's house, and we rumbled up the Seyers' long, winding, treacherous gravel driveway. The house and the land around it were like an amusement park. Over the years, the Seyers had a full-size antique tractor to play on, a tree house, giant tractor tires, giant wooden cable spools to roll around the yard, a dog kennel with numerous zany dogs, a multi-room basement, a piano, basketball hoop, a full-length carnival funny mirror, a giant hammock, a football field, a VCR, interesting bathroom wallpaper, a sink with funny-tasting well water, a complete bar room, posters of Farrah Fawcett and Jaws, a turkey deep fryer, and a 40-foot pulley system with a trapeze bar that you could hang onto and fly from the top of a tree down into a pile of autumn leaves. Brian was my ticket to living the dream. In the 2nd grade, Brian and I began our football careers in a Pee-wee football league, and not surprisingly, Mr. Seyer, Coach Seyer, was our head coach. And at our very first practice, it was about 27 degrees, and Coach Seyer tries to teach us this elaborate play-calling system. And very quickly, he explains to all the 2nd graders that each player's position has a number, and by stringing together a list of numbers, you can call plays, like a right halfback run between the left guard and the left tackle. So in about 2 seconds, he tells us what all the numbers are, and then he confidently calls a play. And it's like 22, 4, 12, 7, 2, 2, 9 on 2, break. And all the 2nd graders just stand there in this freezing huddle thinking, what have I gotten myself into? On the way home from football practice, my mom and I, she's here today. My mom and I rode in the back seat of a station wagon, and Coach, Mrs. Seyer, and Brian were in the front seat. And I leaned over to my mom and I whispered, I don't understand the plays. And my mom whispered back, nobody does. And we actually mastered the play-calling system soon after that. It wasn't that hard. And Coach Seyer was our favorite and best coach and buddy on team after team, season upon season. Brian and I were huge music fans. We loved Kiss, The Who, Spinal Tap, and the Blues Brothers. Now, you already know this, but Mrs. Seyer is cool. She loves rock and roll as much as Brian and I did, and in 1979, she, along with Coach and Mike, took Brian and me to see Kiss at Market Square Arena. It was a spectacle. This was old school Kiss with the 4 original members in makeup and costume, and we loved it. But don't ask Coach Seyer about it. He was out in the corridor covering his ears for the entire show. Brian grew up playing piano, bass guitar, guitar, and trombone, and he could sing. And I played drums and was really interested in recording music. And we played and practiced a lot at my house in my bedroom. And even though I knew a lot about music and was very serious about pursuing it, it was Brian who very nonchalantly got things done. It was Brian who got us our first gig at Grandview Elementary School. Brian named the band. We were PhD, the Doctors of Rock. In high school, we also played in the school concert band, jazz band, and marching band. And we were still trying to be a rock band too. And one day, Brian wrote a song and had us record it at my house with our friend Jeff Gold on guitar. Then Brian sent the tape to Bob and Tom at Q95 for some funny thing they were doing called the basement tapes. And the next thing I know, I'm driving to school and I hear our song on the radio. And Bob and Tom made fun of it and said it was terrible. And it was awesome. I went into school at 7:30 in the morning, and all these kids very respectfully were saying to me, "Hey man, I heard your song on the radio." And that was all Brian. Brian made me a star. In our last year of high school, Brian put together another band called Cheap Date, and he pretty much told me I had to be in this band. And the next thing I know, I'm in a band that is getting paid and working enough that it constituted a high school part-time job. And we played at Ball State and IU and local bars and parties, and it was the most fun I've ever had. Brian was also a disc jockey for student radio stations. And these were all things I dreamed of doing, being in bands, getting on the radio, being a DJ. And Brian just went out and did it all. And he brought me along whenever he could. I didn't even know how he was doing it. He just took care of it. He was a leader without being bossy. He didn't brag. He didn't lecture. He just accomplished things, fun things. And years later, my parents and I, and Mark Neisenbaum and his wife Lisa, attended Brian and Kelly's wedding. And that was 12 years ago. So there we were again, Seyer, Neisenbaum, and Wolf. And at that time, we'd only known each other for a mere 26 years. A couple of years ago, I dug up some cassette tapes of Brian and me when we were kids talking to each other and just messing around. But hearing the tape as an adult, I was pretty shocked. I heard how I was interacting with Brian, and to me it sounded like I was bossing Brian around, interrupting him, trying to one-up him, and generally being obnoxious. And Brian was just giggling and playing along. But I felt that I owed Brian an apology because I was pretty sure that what I heard was how I acted my entire childhood. So I called Brian just a couple of years ago, and I told him I wanted to apologize for being an obnoxious jerk the entire time I grew up with him, and that I knew better now than to act like that. And Brian simply said, "I don't remember it like that." And he didn't even elaborate. It seemed that it had never crossed his mind that I was annoying. And why not? Because he was such a nice guy, so relaxed, so accepting. He saw the good things in people, and he didn't sweat the small stuff. And just a month or two ago, I was looking forward to getting some advice and wisdom from Brian, because now I am married too, and my wife Ann and I have a baby boy, Isaac, who's almost 2. And because Brian just got his MBA, has 2 big boys, Sam and Nathan, and started a new band, I thought to myself, I'm grateful Brian's out there because I'm going to need his help as I forge ahead with my family, career, and my new band. But then the accident and this past grueling month, and I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken over the Seyers and our collective loss. But you know Brian is still there for us, and I've already felt it. 2 or 3 days after the accident, while thoughts of Brian were overwhelming me and we were all hoping he would pull through, I looked at my son, Isaac, and I swear, in a flash, my love for my son doubled. And even though he can really drive you crazy because he's almost 2 and he's bouncing off the walls and he knows what he wants, I thought, oh man, I love this baby boy so much, and I have to stop sweating the small stuff, and I promise I'm going to be a nice guy and a loving father and a committed husband, like my friend Brian Seyer has always been and always will be.